Welcome Bloodbowl fans. In today's video, we're delving into the Dark Elf team's playbook. I'm currently working on a tournament team to play some practice games against a buddy, and he suggested I looked at the Dark Elves. So I've scoured every source I could to put together this video, which hopefully should help you as much as it helps me. Remember, I'm not a Blood Bowl coach, I just play one on TV. So if you think something I've said isn't correct, or if you have any extra tips on how to get more out of a Dark Elf team, please do leave a comment. Alright, let's get started. Let's kick things off by introducing the Dark Elf roster. The first thing to note is that the Dark Elf team doesn't have a catcher or thrower. Instead, we have a runner, which kind of acts as both. Players overall are pretty expensive, with the cheapest being the lineman at 70k. We also have a lot of aggressive players, blitzers, witch elves, and assassins. Everyone has agility 2+, so handling the ball and dodging away should be good, but their passing skill isn't great. Everyone is also quite fast, so getting into position should be good. Linemen are the backbone of your team. That agility is going to let them dodge away when you need to, and if they do need to block, that armor should keep them relatively safe. They're a solid all-rounder, however, they are relatively expensive for a lineman. Blitzers are the stars of the Dark Elf team, offering great movement, high agility, and good armor. They start with the block skill, making them formidable on both offense and defense. The Dark Elf team is one of the few teams with the luxury of having 4 blitzers. Blitzers tend to be fast and hard hitting, usually starting with block. While the name might suggest they're great for blitzing, they end up being pretty great all-rounders, especially this Dark Elf with agility 2+. The only other teams with 4 blitzers are the orcs and the humans, so this is the only elf team with that option. Points are tight, so it can be tricky to fit in all 4, but they are worth it. Witch elves bring a unique element to this team. With great movement, high agility, and dodge, they are going to be able to get where you want them. They have frenzy, which is a bit of a double-edged blade that you need to handle carefully. If they have the support, it will let them get a lot of work done, but without support, frenzy could leave them stranded and making poor blocks. If they go down though, jump up lets them get up without spending 3 move, and if they want to block, then they just need to succeed at an agility test, which is 2+. Runners are the team's ball carriers, boasting great movement, high agility, and the dump-off skill. Their primary role is to navigate the field, evade opponents, and score touchdowns. The dump-off skill lets them perform a quick pass if they are nominated for a block, which is a great way to keep the ball safe. Often you're going to use them to hold onto the ball until you hand off to one of the other players. As all have agility 2+ to make the catch and great movement, almost everyone on the team is able to score. The last player we have are the assassins, who are sometimes considered a bit of a trap. At 85 points, they are more expensive than a runner. You take them for the stab skill, which lets you skip straight to the armor roll instead of making a block. Often though, you're just better making a block in the first place. They are recommended mainly as inducements against low armor targets who will be hard to take down with block due to dodge or the block skill. This is a pretty flexible team. Your players aren't strong, but you do have a lot of block and frenzy. They're all fast, but not crazy fast. You've got fantastic agility, but not great passing, and no dedicated throwers or catchers. Among all the elf teams, the Dark Elves perform the poorest in terms of playing a passing game. This addition significantly downplayed the emphasis on passing though, hitting those other elf teams much harder than the Dark Elves. This is a precision team. The high agility means you can pretty reliably dodge out of tackle zones. This means you get to choose your engagements, where other elf teams are keen to just get out of combat. The Dark Elf who dodges out will often move to assist a block or blitz against lone targets. When it comes to actually scoring, the team plays a pretty great running game, either having the runner take it all the way down or handing the ball off to another player to score. Alright, let's discuss some starting team compositions for Dark Elves. Out of the box, you can make a team with 5 linemen, 2 runners, 2 witch elves, 2 blitzers, and 1 reroll. This team really isn't ideal, but it is a starting point. The blitzers are the real star of this team, so you need to have 2 boxes for that, which is a real limitation. With 2 boxes, you can go for a more classic build. This is 6 linemen, 1 runner, 4 blitzers, and 2 rerolls. This build focuses on cramming as much high armor as you can in, and offers survivability during early games. Then once you get some games under your belt, you can start working on getting those witch elves into the roster. In this case, almost everyone except for the runner is 9 armor. It might seem like a small difference, but moving from 8 to 9 changes the odds significantly. Rolling 8 or more on 2d6 is roughly 42%, while rolling 9 or more drops to around 28%. There are a few other potential builds, but I definitely think this is the best one. Unfortunately, due to the high cost of players in this team, there aren't really a lot of options. As your Dark Elf team progresses, you get to develop their skills. For linemen, prioritize dodge, block, and wrestle, with one player specializing in the kick skill to reduce the risk of a touchback and to allow you to direct the ball to the side of the pitch where you're stronger. Runners can benefit from skills like leader for an additional reroll or dodge to enhance their ball carrying ability. Since blitzers already start with block, focus on giving them dodge first to create that deadly blodge combo. While assassins aren't recommended, dodge can be a good option to help them get into favorable positions. With witch elves, they are terrifying once they get block in addition to the dodge they start at. Giving one wrestle is also a great way to take down players with block or sure hands. While having block means you don't go down to a both down result, having wrestle lets you take an opponent who does have block down on the same result. This works really well with the jump up skill, having the witch elf ready to go next turn. Using wrestle does not result in a turnover. Both players actually don't go down, and instead they go straight to prone without the injury roll. When it comes to star players, the Dark Elf team can select from any that will play for the Elven Kingdoms League or just any team. For the scope of this video, I'm going to focus on the Dark Elf players rather than looking at star players. Okay, now this is what I'm interested in. This is a tournament-ready Dark Elf team. For tournaments, what typically happens is you get a slightly larger budget to purchase players from, and you get to assign some additional skills. In a way, this simulates team development across a league. Depending on the team's tier, the amount of skills you get and the number of star players you can take will change. In this example, we're looking at a 1.15 million starting team. This lineup consists of 6 linemen, 1 runner, 3 blitzers, 2 witch elves, and 3 rerolls. We've also taken Apothecary to try keep our players on the field. That's a total of 1.15 million on the button. I'd love to get a 4th blitzer, but the points really don't work out. Dark Elves are a tier 1 team, so we can either get 6 primary skills, 4 primary skills and a secondary skill, or 3 primary skills and access to 1-star player. Going for those 6 skills will definitely give us the most bang for a buck. In this lineup, we recommend giving the runner the dodge skill, which will keep him a little bit safer, and will reduce the risk when dotting out tackle zones. Moving on to the blitzers, all 3 should receive the dodge skill. This not only increases their survivability, but also helps them get where they need to. This will mean that everyone with the lineman are going to be agility 2+ with dodge, which will give us a lot of flexibility on the pitch. For the witch elves, we've gone with wrestle skill for 1 and block for the other. That witch elf with block is just going to be a formidable force on the pitch, and the wrestle skill is similar, but it will be great for taking down ball carriers. While you may be playing your game online in Cyanide Games' version of Bloodbowl, this game originally and still is a board game to be played with miniatures. Now, there are a couple of different options you can take here. While the classic Games Workshop team is a great starting point, it has its limitations. Specifically, it only has 2 blitzers. The box doesn't include assassins, which are available through Forge World, but as discussed earlier, that's less of a concern. So we're looking at getting 2 boxes essentially just for 2 more blitzers. We do end up with a lot of repeats, as there is only 1 pose for each of the positionals. An alternative approach that appeared on Warhammer Community is to use Dark Eldar miniatures from the Warhammer 40k universe. You can use Drukhari Kabalites for the upper bodies of the blitzers, and then use the legs of the witchers for the lower bodies. Reverse this combination for the linemen, and then the witch elves and the runners can be straight up witches, but make sure you use different heads to differentiate them. To enhance your conversions, it might also be helpful to pick up some Blood Bowl specific arms. This can add a nice unique touch and overall improves the aesthetic. Lastly, if you're looking for third-party options, there are several 3D printed Dark Elf teams available. I have this Corvus Dark Elf team on order. The perk here is you get all the models you need all at once. These designs are a lot more varied than the GW versions, where you're essentially stuck with just one pose for each positional. On the downside, you do need to either print them yourself or get them printed, which could make for some quality issues. You also won't be able to play them in any official GW events, but I think unless you're living in Nottingham, it should be fine for the majority of your games. To consider how we play the game, let's start with setup formations. So this is where we place each player before drive starts. We'll be looking at 4 formations, as recommended by the Bonehead podcast channel, each suited for different scenarios. Remember, if you're receiving the ball, you'll get the first turn, but if you're kicking instead, you need to prepare for the other coach to get their hits in first. Against a bash-orientated team, the classic anchor defense is a reliable choice. This formation focuses on protecting your players while leaving the flanks open. The linemen stand in the front line, relying on their high armor value to get back up. If they want to do some damage, your opponent is going to have to break through one of those blitzers to get in with your runner and your witch elves. An alternative option, especially if you've got witch elves in your lineup, is to position them in these L formations. So if your opponent blitzes into one of your blitzers on the side, they'll have to disengage or risk setting up the witch elves for a double frenzy 2-die block. Against finesse teams like other elves, the chevron defense can be highly effective. This formation creates multiple screens and forces the opponents to make numerous dodge rolls. The central line is the most accessible, but opponents must first clear the linemen and then face the threat of the blitzers and witch elves coming in from the sides. Now let's move on to some offensive options. The formation we'll discuss first is the 5-4-2. This setup features a strong front line consisting of 2 blitzers and 3 linemen who can hold their ground and create space. The runner and potentially some linemen at the back can sweep up and pick up the ball. On the wider zones, you'll find the blitzers and witch elves, ready to provide support. The initial blitzer serves as a tough target, and if the opponent ventures further, the witch elves are waiting to friend him off the pitch. An alternative offensive formation is the heavy flank. Here the aim is to punch through on one side and create a strong cage along that flank. The witch elves are quite dangerous here as they always threaten to push players into the crowd. One of the great things about the Dark Elf team is if your opponent shifts to heavily defend on this side, the Dark Elves have the agility to disengage and the movements take advantage of gaps made on the other side of the board. Moving on to tactics. These are the smaller elements that complement your overall strategy and help you execute your game plan more effectively. Let's start with screening, which, although it may resemble a formation, is a fluid option. The goal here is to force dodges from your opponent, potentially leading to turnovers. The more layer your screen has, the harder it is for your opponent to break through. It's important not to mark opponents here, as that would give them free blocks. Instead, limit them to 1 blitz and have them make as many dodges as possible to progress. As the Dark Elves favour a running game in Blood Bowl, understanding their speed is crucial. The runner with a movement allowance of 7 can score a 2-turn touchdown from the line of scrimmage. Keep this in mind as you position your players. Blitzers and Witch Elves, also with a movement of 7, can achieve the same. While the Dark Elves aren't known for their passing game, the runner does have a pass skill of 3+. However, more often than not, you'll be relying on handoffs with a receiver catching on a 2+. This means you can reliably score a single turn touchdown, if needed, starting 1 square off the line of scrimmage. Caging is another basic tactic you'll frequently employ to protect your ball carrier as you advance down the field. The classic cage formation is depicted here, but variations may arise depending on the situation. Note that while the X shape works well, a cross formation does not. With the cross formation, an opposing player can blitz in without having to make a dodge roll to get there. One crucial aspect to consider when playing Dark Elves is how to properly use the Frenzy skill effectively. Frenzy is not an optional skill, so it's important to evaluate all blocks and not just the first one. Let's take a look at an example. In this scenario, we have a lineman supporting from a position where it can also provide support for the Frenzy block. This does mean we need to be very aware of players with sidestep, as they can control where they get pushed back to. This means they can dictate the next block and lead our Witch Elves into a trap. It's also worth noting that we're aiming to frenzy the target player into the crowd. With 2 Witch Elves on the field, we can cover both sides, in effect narrowing the safe parts of the pitch for our opponent. The drawback with this, of course, is the Witch Elf ends up having to follow onto the square next to the sideline. If you blocked as part of a blitz action, don't forget that you can move after a blitz if you have any movement left. This also makes a sidestep skill a good option for a Witch Elf, as it'll keep them safe. We've already talked about making cages, but it's also worth looking at how to break them. There aren't really any clever tricks for the Dark Elves in relation to this. With Agility 2+ and the dodge skill, dodging in beside the ball carrier might seem attractive, but that dodge will be at a -3 penalty, so it'll be a 5+ with a reroll. That's about a 44% chance of succeeding, doable but very risky. Bloodbowl is all about managing risk, so this is the sort of play you'd only really look at if you've played out the other options. You're much better off first taking out a corner and then moving in after that. We do have the Witch Elf with Frenzy, which can help, but do remember they'll need to follow up, so be aware of where that Witch Elf will end up. As the Dark Elf players are strength 3, pretty much every blocker blitz will need some support. Luckily, we have the agility to get someone into position if needed. In this way, the bash game of the Dark Elves is about precision strikes. They will not win a straight up brawl in the middle of the pitch. So it's important to consider whether or not to mark an opposing player. Marking can be a strategic move to disrupt your opponent's plans, but it's essential to choose your targets wisely. We can happily mark players with strength of 2, like goblins, halflings, skinks, good runners, and many catchers. It's worth noting that our linemen and blitzers have an armor value of 9, making them a bit tougher and more capable of withstanding blocks. Additionally, the blitzer possessed a block skill, making them harder for opponents to successfully block them. Our Witch Elves do have dodge, which helps, but they also have that lower armor of 8+. That said, they are aggressive players and will end up marking after making a block. With their jump up skill, even if they do get knocked down, they'll be ready to make a block themselves on a 2+ agility roll for the next turn. Stepping away is usually our preferred tactic. It's leveraging the agility of our Dark Elf players with their impressive 2+. However, this can give our opponents more options to dictate the play. Knowing when to mark and shut down those options is a key tactical decision. We already talked a little bit about how to break a cage. In this tactic, we're marking the corners of the cage for a very particular reason. A player that throws a block isn't moving, or at least if they're not blitzing. So our opponent has to choose between throwing blocks or trying to dodge out and move the cage. And that brings us to the end of the playbook. We hopefully have a bit of a better understanding of players, we have some set formations, and we have some general tactics to consider during the game. Remember, it's important to assess the situation, work out your options, and understand the risks involved. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Dark Elf Playbook. Hopefully you found this video informative and valuable for honing your Dark Elf strategy on the pitch. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with any other Blood Bowl fans. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment below. I'd be thrilled to hear from you. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible 2-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.